Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Kurt Schmidt, president and partner at Foundry. I am excited for today's show because it is a subject that is very close to my heart. Something that I struggled with very early on in my career, and I've somehow gotten better at it. I don't know how, but probably from a lot of screw ups. But I'm going to talk to somebody who is an expert in this sort of thing, and we're going to learn a lot today. So please stick around. You're really going to enjoy this conversation. Before I jump in, I do have to mention the new book, The Little Book of Networking, is available now on the Amazons and all the other places. It's getting great reviews, so go and check it out. All right. So let me take a moment here and introduce my friend Glenn. Glenn, how are you today?
I'm doing really well, Kurt. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great. I'm great now that you're here. So, Glenn, tell me about the work you do and who do you work with?
So I am a business coach. I work with CEOs and their leadership teams, and basically I help them grow their companies. My best work are CEOs who are, as Pat Lencioni would say, hungry, humble, and smart, um, who really feel that they can have an impact on the world and they want to 10x their companies. That's what
Awesome.
I love doing. And I've got some great clients I'm working with right now, helping them do that.
Well, that's great. Well, as someone who works with executives a lot, I can imagine that convincing them to buy into your ideas is an important skill set that one has to learn. So there is a, but there is a difference between how an employee might need to go about it versus maybe a coach goes about it. Let's start real quick with how do you approach this idea of coaching these executives? Do you go in and do you slam your fist on the desk and say, "Listen to me," um, and point to get your finger in their face?
Problem
Um,
is you, Kurt. That's you.
yeah, right. Or do you like pass them notes? Like maybe like somebody does to a president or something. And while they're speaking, what sort of tactics and things have you learned as a coach? Let's start there.
hmm
With how to get buy-in for your ideas.
The Well, what I don't do, Kurt, although it seems like it might be a good idea, I don't like follow shadow the executive throughout the day and sit in the meetings and write little notes and pass it to them. Apologize for what you just said. Although that might be kind of fun. What was-
I would say that might be fun, actually, now that you mention it.
Should I do that with you, Kurt?
I mean, it won't be productive, but it'll certainly be hilarious.
It's a it's a really good question because what I do is I ask a lot of questions, and I find I do function someone as an advisor because I do have a business background. And I was a CEO. So I learned a lot because I made a lot of mistakes, right? That's how we truly learn. But somehow along the way, it worked. What I generally do is I ask a lot of questions because I do believe that we all have it inside of us, right? But it's that matter of helping the CEO, the leadership team, them together, pull it out, right? Get rid of the extraneous stuff, get down to the essence of it, and then work that through and make sure like, okay, this is good. What is it really like? How does it work? Then getting into how do we put it in place and getting an
Okay.
action. And what I do is I'll tell people I actually signed a new CEO last month, and remember him saying he's like, "Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to embed yourself in my business? And how much work are you going to do?" I'm like, "I'm not doing the work. I'm a coach. I don't play the game. I'm going to be on the sidelines watching you and your team play the game. I'm going to help you play your best game, not my best game." And ultimately, I believe by doing that in a very thoughtful way, by asking the questions, helping talk through the outcomes, verbalizing the ideas, and then crafting a plan to put in action leads to success. And first and foremost is like having the ability to help people narrow down, focus on 3 to 5 things, and then develop a path to implement them with accountability and timelines. That's part of the magic of it.
Well, and because I've seen great graphs around, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? But with a CEO, it's kind of upside down, right? Is that they're at the bottom, everything is filtering into
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
into this bottom piece. And so that idea of focus that you bring up, that's something, I've struggled with as a business owner, and I've seen bosses I've had in the past. absolutely, absolutely struggle with. But when everything seems, and I don't like to use the term on fire because it's not that it's on fire, but when everything seems to need attention, Glenn,
Mhm. Yeah.
how do you help people focus through those times when it's almost a daily thing?
Yeah. Well, one is make as many decisions in advance. So that is have a really good plan and stick to the plan. Because if you have a good plan and if you have really good core values for your company, which is how people behave in the company, that sticking to the plan, how do we get to the end, doing it by working with our core values and in a way that's congruent with our core values will ultimately allow everyone in the company to be able to make much better decisions. So then for the leader to not have to feel they have to make those decisions and not have to always be putting out the fires afterwards from bad decisions or bad practices. So spending the time up front. Um, I ask a lot of people because, oh, I got put out a bunch of fires. Sorry, I can't. I'm like, really? Are you a firefighter or are you an arsonist? Are you setting these
Yes.
fires with poor planning, with not trusting, right? With not delegating, with not empowering your people?
I worked for a lot of arsonists in the time in my day, to be honest with you. But very, very well intentioned arsonists. I don't know if that's a thing. I don't think that's a phrase that's ever been said, but they definitely have a heart of gold while they're going around with a flamethrower
Yeah.
and doing what I enjoy to call it the seagull maneuver, which is the swoop and poop, right? Which is
Mhm.
I'm going to fly into a situation, a meeting, a side conversation or whatever. I'm going to drop some bombs, and then I'm going to fly away, never be seen from again or held accountable for any of those choices or decisions. And nor will I remember those choices or decisions, Glenn, that I had made at that time. Um,
Yeah. Nor will you hold those people accountable to actually implementing because you don't even remember, let alone have the attention span to come back.
right. Well, let's flip the script for a second because a lot of people listen to the show. They work for people. They work for bosses.
Mhm.
And let's say they do have this well-meaning arsonist, this person who is someone who is, maybe not insanely crazy, but maybe is a little less focused. How can I, as maybe another leader in the organization or someone, start to bridge that gap to get them more focused? Because I want a better experience working at the organization, and this person, the way that they operate, impacts my quality of work.
Mhm.
Where would be some of the first places I should start looking or having conversations, Glenn?
Yeah, I think, great question. And I think one of the very simple is let's say if I work for you, Kurt, and I'm coming to you with a problem or an issue, if I think and reflect, don't immediately come to you, Kurt, what should we do? Don't do that. I come to you and say, Kurt, we have an issue, client A, and we made a mistake on their work, but I've been thinking about our core values, which are client first. And because of that, I think we should go back and rework this, but also give them an additional service on top of that for the next month to really kind of make up for it, but also show them, demonstrate that service that they don't even use. And they might even see that. We might even get more business out of it, but be really nice about it because it was kind of their mistake to begin with. I think maybe a communication error, but like, I'll be happy to go to them, take ownership, say I made a mistake and here's what we're going to do about it. I mean, do you think that's an idea that I could do? And I'd be happy to do that. And I'd call the client by the end of the day today.
I love it. Yeah, that's the thing is that if you are someone that's bringing solutions and not problems, that's first and foremost, right? And
Mhm.
that solution could be not like you would like. And I love the skit that you just did there because it's not. I'm saying we're going to do this thing. I'm bringing it to them to give me kind of a stroke of the pen decision, not
Yeah.
a not a I need you to consider all the context and all the angles and really I need you to go into forensics mode and figure out how did we get here and do a
Mhm.
whole CSI thing because I've had those bosses, right, where they decide like they all of a sudden the gloves come out they're like and they're like all right, let's get in there with they get out the little flashlight and start looking for blood splatter, right?
Mhm.
And at the end, they come to the same conclusion everybody else. It doesn't matter, like, right? So
Yeah.
Steve Jobs said Apple is the biggest startup on the planet. They run like a startup. Everything is. They have one person in charge of product, one person in charge of marketing, one person. They don't have any. They have zero committees. They have no committees. Um, and they have built a culture of communication
Yeah.
that is greater than anything else. And the reason why I think he refers to them as the biggest startup in the world is because all these people are relying on other people to do their job,
Mhm.
so that they can get their job done, and that there's a strong sense of trust there. And I
Mhm.
think, kind of back to what you were saying, the idea of building trust with your boss starts, I think, with that transparency, right? Is being able to come to them and say, "Hey, I'm making you a part of this, but I'm not making you accountable for this. I'm not walking in and handing you
Mhm.
this thing and saying, it's your problem now," right?
Yep. Yeah. Well, I think it's come with an idea. Um, Also say, "I'll do it. I'm willing to do it," or say, "Well, here's how I think we could do it. Here's how much I think it could cost us, and here's why by when I think it could be done. And here's what I think is the probable good outcome." But then I allow you to have the power of making that decision. But it's also I'm running this by you. So if I'm a great employee, right, and I wanna go somewhere in the company, I want my ideas tested and I want your feedback. Many times I would say to the leader, like, even if you don't agree with it 100%, maybe it's not what you would do, let them try it because that's the ownership part. Because as soon as you as a leader tell me as your employee what to do, you own the outcome. I don't. And I'm like, oh, it's what Kirk told me to do. I don't know. It's not going to work. I don't have the ownership over it. I'm just going to like kind of half ass it probably.
Yeah, well, that's again back to, the way Steve Jobs approached these things is, I mean, he was famously asked, like, "Can people say no to you, Steve?" Right? And he's like, "Well, why did I hire these people for if they can't say no to me?" But that's a common thing, and I'm sure you hear this in your coaching business because I've heard it over and over again when I've coached executives in the past, which is I don't know if I have the right team. I don't know. I don't trust them, and I don't trust their decisions. And the first thing I'm like, if you held up the mirror to understand, is this a you problem or is it really a they problem? Because,
Mhm.
it sure there might be a bad apple on the leadership team. That's very possible. But when someone comes to you, Glenn, and says, I'm having a hard time delegating because I don't know if my team can execute. What are the things that go through your mind?
Well, frankly, the first thing that goes in my mind is like, well, here's a classic one, Kurt, and I get this all the time. Oh, I don't need coaching. I think some of my guys could use coaching. That sales leader, he's not doing very well. And I'm pointing purposely because I kind of thought, I want to say, well, where are the fingers really pointing? There's three of them pointing back at you because in all my client CEOs will tell you this. I tell them, as CEO, you're either causing the problem or you're tolerating it. So if you have what you perceive to be a weak leader on your team, you're causing that. You very might well be, but with diminishing behavior, or you're tolerating it because you hired them and you still have them on your team. It's free agency.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what's the, so tell me more. Let's pull on that thread a little bit
I
more.
gave you like concepts in one, didn't I?
So you say that to someone, what do they immediately do? Do they go pale white and
Well,
or
if I said,
are they like, "Well, yeah, I know that, but still the salesperson needs coaching."
well, yeah. Well, a couple things there. I always, all my client companies, we put in scorecards. So first question is, do they know what you expect of them? Is that really clear? And is there clear and measurable accountability around them? Do they know what success looks like? Have they accepted that mission? Once they understand it, have they said, "Yep, I can do that"? Um, and do they have the tools to do it? And if that's the case, then the coaching would be, well, then what's the gap? What aren't they doing? So maybe it's a salesperson. The salesperson themselves, do they not have good closing skills? Are they not doing the activities to develop leads? all those things. But it
Right.
is really first and foremost is what are the expectations? Another question I ask, and like I said, I ask a lot of questions is it a people or a process problem? And there's really, you think about it in business, there's only two of those. It's either the process or the people. Do you have the process? And sometimes they don't have the process. So how can we expect our leaders or people to do a good job when they don't have a good process or they don't have the tools that would kind of fall in the process, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's the definition of business is people working in a process. Like when people think of business, they think of these entities and things. It's people, and they're all working in a process. That's all business is.
Oh,
So,
no, Kurt, hang on.
oh, go
Every
ahead.
CEO I ever met will tell me, "Oh, no, but no, our business isn't that simple. You don't get it. Our business is different."
It is different. They are unique and beautiful snowflakes. I understand.
See?
I understand. Well, speaking of that though, the
Mhm.
idea of measurement, um, I
Yeah,
I can imagine can be challenging for some of these places because I'm guessing that in some cases they don't have measurement in any significant way around performance and these sorts of things, especially with maybe within the leadership team.
yeah. No, that's really true, and it's something that needs to get put in place. I think it was Deming that said, "What you can't what you can't change, what you can't measure." We don't.
Right.
So, even if it's the simplest metrics in place, uh, just self-reported. Even I guarantee you that if a salesperson, if you say, "Okay, how many client contacts did you make?" If I said the morning, we met in the morning in our morning huddle, which is a game changer that I have all my client companies do. Um, "Kurt, how many calls are you gonna make today? How many client reach outs are you gonna make today?" And you said 20. And then if you and I had another 10-minute huddle at the end of the day, I said, "Kurt, how many did you make?" You said, "I only made 15." Yes. Like, "All right, what do you do tomorrow?" We repeat that over and over. You could very well be lying to me about how many you made, but you're probably not going to, right? And we're going to know by the results. And I guarantee you that tomorrow you're going to make 25,
Mhm.
right? Or on the
But
third
that's
day,
it. But Glenn, that's actually managing people. I don't want to do that. I didn't get in
Mm.
this job to actually like manage them. I want to hand them tasks and then expect them to get done. Why is that so hard?
Steve, you thought you were in the whatever business. Nope, you're now in the people business.
Oh man. Oh, okay. Well, then I'm gonna go back to some other business. So the
Yes.
the thing is though is that
Right.
is
Doing
that
your job.
yeah, right. Well, and my dad always said, there's two kinds of people in the world. There's people who have a coach and people that don't know they need a coach. And
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it comes down to where I've had great bosses and great managers in the past who were coaches with me. They would hold me aside and be like, the way that you kind of reacted in that meeting, here's what I would change about that.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't wait for like my annual review to like
Right.
bring
Right.
that up or things because they were actively managing me because these good bosses always said, your performance reflects my performance.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
if I don't really care about my performance, I don't really care about your performance, right? And until it's too late, right? Until it's like time for annual reviews, and now we gotta like button up our collar and like put on our church shoes, right? So if it comes down to that, Glenn, like if I'm not used to that, if because what some people have pushed back on me is say, well, that sounds like micromanagement to me. What you just pointed out, Glenn, that sounds like micromanagement.
I think micromanagement is me telling you exactly what to do and how to do it. Me telling you what does success look like. It would start in the salesperson, it would really start off with, let's talk about what is our sales process? Where does it begin? Where does it end? And how do we understand the relationships and the measurements within that? What does success look like? And Kurt, it just it kills me. I don't know, are you a sports fan?
Oh yeah, I love sports ball.
So, okay, you love sports ball. So at any game, at any moment, at a pro level, right? You have t how many statistics do you have that every single player on the field at any given moment in time, almost in a microsecond, we know exactly how they're doing, and they do too, and the crowd does, and the other team does, right?
Yeah, right. If anybody's seen the movie, you don't even have to know sports. If you've seen the movie Moneyball,
Yeah.
which a lot of people have, that'll give you an idea of just the amount of stats that can go into a professional sport.
Yeah, 100%. And there's coaches, there's a whole coaching staff for a football team. And yet no one would ever say that's micromanaging. They'd say, well, that's good sports, right? I need a coach, right? Coach is great. Listen to coach. And the coach, one of the tools they have, and everybody has, is they understand what success looks like and they can measure success. And it hangs right in the middle of the field. But if we try and introduce that at work, everybody shies away. Like
Yeah.
they'll root for it on Sunday and then they'll shy away from it on Monday morning. But successful business, it's not a family. It's not. Family is a whole different, you know, the idea behind family and the objective of family.
I don't
Way
need
different.
two families. No, this
No,
isn't
no.
this. This
Yeah.
isn't the '50s, and when. Anyways, sorry.
Any business, whether it's a nonprofit or for profit, money is the oxygen that fuels that.
Hmm.
And if we run out of money, we run out of the company fails.
Yeah.
So our job as leaders is to keep the company going and ultimately provide great services for our clients and great jobs for our employees and something, hopefully something to better the world.
Yeah.
And, right. And in order to do that, we have to be successful. To be successful, we have to measure because
Well,
that's
in
what,
some of the worst bosses I've had is when I think of micromanagement too, and it kind of goes back to what you're saying about setting these goals. Is that they're inconsistent. They manage inconsistently. Sometimes they're all over you, and then the next when you expect them to be there, they're totally absent. They're gone,
yeah.
and it
Yeah.
creates a very uneasy feeling with the people around you if you're not consistent in your management and the way that you are approaching people. So one of the things you said is like, yeah, let's establish scores, right? But I've had
Mhm.
bosses in the past that move the goalpost as
Yeah.
you're getting closer, right? Hey, you know that thing that you were worried about for 3 months? We just delivered it. It was great. The client was awesome and all this other stuff. And they just sit there. They don't even look up from their desk and they're like, yeah, but this other thing is really is still messed up and whichever. And I'm like, well, you just told me 3 months ago that this was like the pinnacle thing, that this was this was a touchdown in overtime. Like this is I caught the
Yeah.
Hail Mary. Like why are we having it? And so that inconsistency is really key. So Glenn, I don't really have a question there other than I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. One of the things, that's where documentation and setting
Mm.
expectations can really help. And so I tell you, I actually went to work for a new boss once and I had this quarterly bonus plan. And and he was one of those people, he said, Glenn, this is gonna be a great role. You're perfect for it. You can figure it out. Just figure it out. We haven't, it's the first time we've ever done this role in the company. So figure it out. So after the first quarter, I still remember emailing him and said, hey, did really well in the first quarter. And when do I get my bonus? And he emailed back, said, "Oh, there'll be no bonus. You were totally off base. You didn't do anything what I wanted you to do." And it was because I had no right. He and I had totally and I worked in a whole different country than him. We had so my
Right.
expectations were this. I was playing, I don't know, I was playing soccer and he's playing lacrosse, maybe. I don't know. He wanted me to play lacrosse. So what I did, after lamenting for 2 or 3 days, but I basically said, I sent an email and said, look, here's 5 things that I'm going to accomplish this next quarter. And of course, I made sure I could achieve them. And I said, um, if this meets with your approval, then how about I have the opportunity to make my bonus up in the first quarter because we understand each other. And this is what I'll do based on my conversation, understanding what I'm going to do. Bam. That for the next 3 quarters, I worked for this person for a year, worked like a charm. And what it all was about was like, here's my expectation. Here's what I'm going to do. And of course, at the end of the quarter, here's, I did this, I did this, I did this. Right. And so he couldn't come back and say, well, I didn't want you to do that because clearly
Mm,
he had signed off on you.
agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't give them to me because I worked for someone previously that was really good at we would actually collaborate on objectives, and we did a full annual plan with objectives and sub priorities and right actions and measurements, and I was worked really well. So I kinda just turned it around this other guy who didn't. I don't know if he was too lazy or just maybe not a great leader, but
Sure. Well, but that's where the idea of like OKRs and things, SMART goals and all these different frameworks have popped up over the years to sort of circumvent some probably poor management in some cases.
yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think, well, ultimately, I think anytime a leader says, "Well, I don't have a, this employee's not doing well," or I hear this all the time, like people, they don't do what I tell them to do. Can't they just do their jobs? Can't they think for themselves? Like, oh, I know where this is coming from. And it's super interesting. So in the book, the CEO Playbook that I just released with some of my coach colleagues, we'd interviewed 72 CEOs. And one of the things that came out of it, so we came out with this thing looking at the analysis called the doom loop. And what we found is the CEOs who talked the most about their fears of inadequacy and, like the imposter syndrome and confidence in the business. What we really uncovered is there's this syndrome of CEOs will generally blame other things or other people in their company. Oh, my sales aren't growing. And ultimately, it's really because they're not good leaders or strong leaders. And the worse their company does, then the less confident they get because they start getting nervous about the business results. And the more nervous they get, the worse of a leader they become. But it's also then they don't become someone who can attract strong leaders to come work for them. Because no one, if you're an A player, you don't want to work for a C boss, right? You don't. So you're going to leave. Um, and then and it just like keeps pervading because then the more desperate poor leaders become, the more they start telling other people what to do. We got to do this. The more they jump in, and I always have this image of like a CEO going to a phone booth, with their suit on and emerging with this like, I'm the CEO, and you may want to stand back. I'm going to fix this problem. Right? They dive into it. And that's the exact wrong thing. Right? They should be, as some of the people you look for, like, great job, Kurt. Awesome. I'm really glad you knocked that one out of the park. Here's another even bigger challenge for you. Can you go do this one? Right? Instead of like, oh, I didn't, you're supposed to be working over here. Right? And just totally demean what you did versus the other way around would have made you like want to rise up and do even better the next time.
Yeah. Well, you see today that, the idea of EQ is so popular, right? I mean,
Hmm.
when I was growing up, we had kind of the Jack Welch sort of approach to most things, right? Command and control. And that's
Hmm.
how, you kept a business like GM running.
Hmm.
So today, though, leaders need to be a bit more sensitive, I guess, in certain cases because they
Hmm.
have expectations around this. I mean, not long ago, I had Thad Levine from the general manager of the Twins on the show, and he had mentioned, um, that he's got a 130-year-old organization and he's trying to get Gen X and
Hmm.
millennials in there, but they have different expectations than
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
did in the past. So this isn't just it's an opportunity for a lot of growth with leaders. But to your point, if you're not interested in personal growth, if you're not interested in
Yeah.
becoming a better leader, then you are going to constantly run into struggles, right?
There's a reason the bottleneck is at the top of the bottle.
Right.
And
Yes. Right. Right. Well, but with that,
if they go out that way.
yeah, right. So besides coaching, obviously I need to go out and hire Glenn. What are some other avenues that you tell your clients and people you've worked with, other ways that they can grow professionally and personally, that you found success in?
I leaders are readers. And you hit the nail on the head is that for any leader in a company, in order for the company to grow, the leader has to grow faster than the rate of the company. You really do. Because if not, just in some of the examples you gave in organizations you've worked in, they're going to hamper that. They're not going to attract the top talent. That the top talent isn't going to give their 100% as it relates to not just their time, working, but the intellectual capacity. That's really what we want. And I think you know, the reading is huge. Listening to podcasts, I still thrive on like seeing people speak live. I took 5 of my client CEOs down to Chicago in October, and we saw Jim Collins for a day. So Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, and there were 500 people in the room, and we were all there for the same reason. And it was just crazy how amazing the experience was and just how even though I read all of Jim Collins' books, to hear him that day and then to meet the next day with the CEOs and talk about the concepts and are we all going to apply that to our business? It brought the concept alive in so many different ways. So,
How
um,
many of those clients did you have to drag there? How many were really excited? How many did you
no,
have to
no, they
drag?
were. Well, they were all excited. The ones that weren't excited were the, other 4 who didn't go. And
Oh, okay, got it.
you know who you are, not Kurt, but if
You
anybody's
know
gonna
who you
listen,
are. Yeah, well, because that's the thing is that I've had to drag leaders kicking and screaming towards success many times in my career, right? And I've had employees that I've had to drag kicking and screaming towards
yeah,
success because there are times where people are going to fight you because they don't want your change. They like the idea of change, but they don't want your change, right?
yeah,
And
yep,
there are times where that's where leaders resiliency and leadership comes up because you need to push through for them because you can see there is all this opportunity on the other side. If you can just get them past this mindset that they might have or this blocker that they
mhm,
must that they have. What are some
yep.
tactics that have worked for you in this, right? Again, is it slamming your fist on the table? Is it passive aggressive? Well, other leaders do this. I mean, I don't know. I guess you're not one of those. What works for you?
No, ultimately, again, it's gotta be we all have to come to it ourselves. So, to be pushed and coerced into something generally doesn't work. I'm not in the receptive mindset, and for me, it's like, look, you can pick or you can choose it, and ultimately, for me in the work I do, I have the luxury of, for the most part, being real work with people who I want to work with. If it's someone who's not a good learner, who's not going to those things, who's not moving along the program, they're not growing, right? They're not gonna see success with coaching, and we're gonna split ways. And it's happened. And ultimately, I'll tell when I start a client, like, this is a process, and I don't
Yeah,
do the work for
right.
you. It's not like you're gonna buy a lifetime membership and, automatically you're gonna be buff and, lose 30 pounds. Like, you gotta show up and do the work. And you and I both know, if we hire a coach at Lifetime who's saying, "Hey, let's put another plate on there," or, "Hey, let's run another mile," or, "Hey, you're not doing that right, so therefore you're not getting the full benefit of that exercise." Like, that's the stuff I do. That's challenging, it's the questioning, it's the observing, and it's pointing things out. And I don't do it in a forceful way, but I can do it in a very direct way. I'll
Yeah.
always ask permission. "Kurt, you know, would you like me to share my observations with you on what I thought happened in that meeting?"
No,
"Yeah?"
I don't want you to because I'm really nervous about what you're gonna say. No, but to that point about, and that's one way that I've found managing up works really well is kind of the yes and right. So the boss is saying,
Yeah.
I want to make this and I want to make this, and then you've got an idea that you think is maybe better than what they want to do. So
Mhm.
one of the ways that I've coached people is saying, yeah, yes, let's do what the boss says, but let's also tell them like, hey, and on top of that, I think maybe if we do this, that
Yeah.
could show, and then you can track those two things. You can slowly start to build up even a bit more trust over
Mhm.
time because I've had people who felt like their boss didn't trust them and
Yeah.
reasonably so because they had mentioned, well, we had actually a really big failed project that we screwed up on, and so now the boss doesn't trust us,
Mhm.
and so now they're dictating a bit more about what
Mhm.
things need to be, and I'm like, well, just
Yep.
meeting the bar is not going to get you further along, so you need to kind of be a yes and move
Yep.
it along, and add your ideas into the boss's ideas because it should always be this teamwork atmosphere, right? Even
Mhm.
though the boss is technically above you in title
Mhm.
and whatever
Yeah.
else, right?
Yep.
But you're all supposed to be rowing the boat towards the same destination.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. A couple of the coaching tips. One is, be brilliant, be brief, and be gone. So, if you're a coaching and delegating up, people can remember that. Another really great technique is, I call it the one-page business plan, and it's, if I have an idea or if there's an issue or there's something, an initiative, instead of coming in saying, "Hey, figure this thing out, boss. I have a great idea. I think we should do this," and you just dump it on the desk and walk out. And then, whoever the leader's like, "Oh, now I got like 116 things on my list." If you come in and say, "Look, I have an idea and here's what it is. And I was thinking, I would, if I didn't work on this thing, I could take some time and I could, build a plan. And I think if it would cost us about this much money or this much time, but I think the benefit would be this." So it's come with a clearly articulated, not just the idea, because it's always who's going to do that. If they do it, what will they not do? Because we all
Yeah.
have full plates. How much is it going to cost, either in time or money? And what's the measurable outcome? Not just, oh yeah, it's a good idea. We can make a lot of money on it. Like, well, what's a lot of money? Is it $100 and $1 million? I don't know, and I don't come in here and dump it on my shoulders to do all the research and thinking about that. But if someone came into me as a leader and did that, wow, that's really good. Or, well, let's explore it. Well, then what about this? Well, did that? So I think it's a really good thing in that yes and because it's like indicating it's more of a play of hey, let's kind of ideate and you open up some space because I think that's the biggest thing is when someone's have an idea, it's like oh man, who's going to do that? Because
Right.
it's just another task.
Yeah, it could be a mess. So Glenn, um, I could talk to you all day. So we
Well,
definitely have to have you back on the show. Um,
would love. Thanks.
so if I want to get in touch with you, Glenn, and if I want to learn more about the work you do and who you do it for and how to contact you, tell me about the book first and foremost, and then
Yeah.
tell me about how I can find you.
So the CEO Playbook. And I collaborated with 3 other coaches on this. It's a 24-page book. We talked to 72 CEOs and, yeah, it came up with some really interesting findings. We came up with the doom loop. So if you wanna know what the doom loop is and how to avoid it as a CEO, this would be a great, because we got some ideas back here at the end, how you can do that. So this is available as a digital download from our website, apexnorth.com. And I'm also very prolific on LinkedIn. I would love any of your listeners, you, Kirk, or LinkedIn, to link in with me and follow me there. I'd love to follow other people because I always love to learn and meet other people.
That's awesome. Glenn, thank you so much for taking the time. I learn so much from you in every conversation we have. And I also highly recommend that playbook to people. I have a copy and it's fantastic. So I'll have links in the description below for anybody that wants to go and check those things out. Glenn, thank you again so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kurt. I enjoyed it. Pleasure
All
talking.
right, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join me. Speaking of books, I've got one and it's on Amazon. So great reviews. Go and check it out. Links in below in the description. And I appreciate you taking time out of your day. We'll see you next time.